Hi everyone, welcome back to Newegg TV. My name is Paul and today I'm going to be doing an unboxing and overview of this motherboard. This is an ASRock P67 EXTREME4 Gen 3 motherboard. It features the P67 chipset as well as the 1155 socket for Intel Sli Bridge as well as upcoming Ivy Bridge CPUs. Now the Gen 3 in this motherboard's name refers to the next generation of PCI Express, which is 3.0, and this is mainly for those of you out there who are using big beefy discrete video cards. Of course, you're going to need a discrete video card since this has the P67 chipset. But for PCI Express 3.0, you actually have the PCI Express controller, which is integrated into your CPU. So right now, for example, if you're using a Sli Bridge CPU, you have a PCI Express 2.0 controller, and that's what this board will default to right now if you drop in a Sli Bridge CPU. So you get 5.0 gigatransfers per second, 16 gigabytes per second effective bandwidth on the PCI Express bus if you're using Sli Bridge. Now, once Ivy Bridge is available, and those are Intel's new 22nm CPUs that are still compatible with the 1155 socket, you get a PCI Express 3.0 controller integrated. That gives you 8.0 gigatransfers per second and effectively 32 gigabytes per second total bandwidth, and that is in both directions along the PCI Express bus. This motherboard has a quick switch interconnect on the board that will allow you to use that PCI Express 3.0 controller. Of course, you will need an Ivy Bridge CPU, so bear that in mind. And also, you may need a BIOS update, so keep that in mind if you're going to buy this board looking for forward compatibility with new Ivy Bridge processors. And now let's do a quick unboxing. Let's see what sort of accessories are included. You get the P67 EXTREME4 Gen 3 quick installation guide right there. It is kind of a fat, quick installation guide, but that's because there's lots of different languages there. Keep that on hand while you're doing your build. You also have an ASRock drivers as well as software manual here, and I'm sorry, not a manual, a driver disk. It's usually best to head to the ASRock website to download the latest drivers, but nice to have that as well. Here we have an input-output shield for the back of your case with color-coded little items there for all your inputs and outputs. We also have a software setup guide, and that's for the motherboard itself. We also have a fast USB technology thing here with lots of mostly text on it. That's talking about the PCI Express, the USB 3.0 integrated chips that they have on board there. You have a couple power adapters here. These are simply Molex to serial ATA power adapters. You have a floppy cable. This board does have floppy support in case you have some floppy disks that you just can't let go of. And this little package here, wrapped up very tightly, is an Sli bridge. And this board does support SLI as well as Crossfire. Crossfire bridges generally come with your Crossfire enabled video card. Now this little bracket here and this little item here are for USB 3.0. So you got a couple of USB 3.0 external ports there. You can mount that in a 3.5-inch slot in your case. You also have this little PCI bracket for the back of your case in case you don't have the space for that up at the front. This will route over to a standard 20-pin motherboard header for your USB 3.0 slots. And this bracket also comes with a mount here for a 2.5-inch drive, so that's handy. You don't lose that 3.5-inch slot entirely. You can still mount, for example, 2.5-inch SSD right there to make use of that slot. Here also you get some serial ATA cables. These are revision 3 SATA 6 gigabit per second compatible. You get 4 of them total, and 2 of them have L brackets on one end. And now the motherboard itself. And here's a look at the motherboard itself. As you can see, we have a dark brown PCB in the back there, black plugs, and some gray heat sinks, as well as all of these gold Japanese-made capacitors for longer lifespan and enhanced durability. Let's talk real quick while we have an overview here about our fan headers. We got a 3-pin header right there, another 3-pin header right there next to the CPU fan header, a 4-pin PWM fan header right there, and then 2 more 3-pin headers right there. So 5 total case fan headers for your case fan needs. And next up, let's talk about all the items on the board in detail, starting down here in the bottom right. We have surface mounted reset and power buttons right there. Those are very convenient to have. Have our front panel connectors right there, standard ones there, LED as well as a speaker header. We have our USB 3.0 20-pin header right there that you can use with that bracket that's included. USB 3.0 ports on this board are controlled by an e-tron EJ168A chip. You can see that chip right there. Next to that is a debug LED. That's very handy, especially if you're having any problems getting your system to boot up properly. Debug LED will tell you what the problem might be. Next up we have 1, 2, 3 USB 2.0 ports, or I should say headers, that you can route to the front or back of your case for some extra USB. We have a 1394 FireWire port right there, consumer infrared header right there next to it, a floppy connector there. As mentioned, we have a floppy cable that comes along with this if you're hanging onto your old floppy drive. A COM port next to that, COM port header I should say, and finally our HD audio header for your front panel mic and headphone jacks. Next up, let's talk about PCI Express. Here's all our PCI slots. We have PCI Express X1s here and here, as well as a couple legacy PCI slots here and here. Next up, we have our full-length 16x PCI Express slots. Top two are triple spaced, the bottom two are double spaced. Again, this will support SLI or Crossfire, and also you can do quad SLI or quad Crossfire X, but you probably want to do that only if you have an Ivy Bridge processor. Again, these will be PCI Express revision 2 if you're using a Sandy Bridge processor, revision 3 if you can drop in an Ivy Bridge. Make sure if you upgrade into Ivy Bridge in the future, you will want to update your BIOS to make sure you have maximum compatibility. This top one is a 16-speed slot, so you probably want to drop your graphics card into there. You can also, if you're running dual card SLI or Crossfire X, you can use both of these slots here. This one is an X8 slot, and they'll default to X8 and X8 if you're using 2 cards. If you're running 3 cards, you have this bottom slot here, which is X4, and they'll run at X8, X8, and X4. Next up, we have our P67 chipset right there underneath this heat spreader. P67 chipset also controls our Sata ports here, or at least 6 of them. They have a sticker over these 6 to let you know, hey, that's best to plug in your boot drive in particular to those ports because they'll be a little bit faster than the add-on ports there. Black ones here are Sata Revision 2, that's 3 gigabit per second. 2 gray ones here are Sata Revision 3, 6 gigabit per second. Again, those are controlled by the P67 chipset. And finally, we have a couple add-ons, Sata Revision 3, 6 gigabit per second ports here. Those are controlled by a Marvell SE9120 chip. Bear in mind that the bottom one here also shares its bandwidth with the eSATA port on the back, so you can use one or the other. Let's continue on up the side of the board. Here we have our 24-pin standard motherboard power connector. Here we have our DDR3 slots. This supports dual-channel DDR3. It supports overclock speeds of up to 2,133 megahertz. Supports up to 32 gigabytes of DDR3 memory there. That is if you can get your hands on some 8 gigabyte DIMMs, which are kind of hard to come by right now. If not, you can use 4 gig DIMMs and still get up to 16 gigs if you populate all 4 slots. Remember to use 2 DIMMs at once so you can take advantage of dual channel capability. Next up here is our LGA socket, LGA 1155 to be exact. Sandy Bridge CPUs can fit in there right now. Ivy Bridge CPUs can fit in there as well once they're available. You have a dual mounting solution here, right? So actually for 1155 or 1156 compatible coolers, you can drop them in right there. And you also have LGA 775 mounting holes right here. So if you have an older CPU cooler that you're really attached to and it's LGA 775, it is compatible with this motherboard. Here we have our cooling solution for our voltage regulation area. It's over the MOSFETs right there. They are gray. It says DigiPower Extreme. We have an 8+2 phase power VRM power delivery for the CPU there. That's for extra overclocking. Heat pipe there between those coolers to make sure that you get as much cooling as possible and use those most effectively. Up here at the top we have a 8-pin EPS power connector. If your power supply only has a 4-pin, you can plug it in right there, but you will get better overclocking performance if you plug in the 8-pin. While I'm at it, there's one more additional power plug down lower here. Here it is. This is a Molex power plug right there, and ASRock is recommending if you're running dual card SLI or Crossfire X that you want to plug in a supplemental Molex power connector to that port to make sure you get sufficient power to your PCI Express slots. Finally, let's talk about the inputs and outputs on the back. Over here on the left side we have a PS2 ports for a keyboard and mouse. We also have a clear CMOS button that lights up with an LED so you can externally clear your CMOS and reset your BIOS settings to default. We have a coax output right there. We have a optical toslink output as well for audio. We have a couple USB 2.0 ports, a couple USB 3.0 ports. we have a gigabit LAN port, 2 more USB 2.0 ports, 2 more USB 2.0 ports. So let's count up the USB 2.0, 2, 4, 6 there total on the back. We also have a FireWire port right there, an eSATA port right there. Again, that shares bandwidth from the Marvell controller, so shares with the 2 ports that I showed you earlier next to your P67 control ports. Finally, here we have our audio outs. This supports 7.1 channel audio, and it operates on a Realtek ALC 892 codec. And that is going to wrap it up for this video. Once again, this has been the ASRock P67 EXTREME4 Gen 3 motherboard featuring the 1155 socket for Intel Sandy Bridge and upcoming Ivy Bridge CPUs, as well as the P67 chipset. I'm Paul with Newegg TV. If you enjoyed today's video and want to see more just like it, please head over to our Newegg YouTube channel and don't forget to subscribe. Thank you for watching, and we will see you next time.